Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns, and we are back once again. We're kind of getting into this rhythm right now. We're got the rhythm in the studio. We're up and running on a little bit of a gloomy day, but it is still a day, and because it's a day,
it still is a day.
We're here.
It's a day. Hey everybody, welcome to your day. Don't know if you're going to be gloomy today, but you know, well, and really when people get to hear us, it's at the end of their day.
Right.
Well, or waning.
That's true.
It's a waning part of the day.
We usually catch them in the evening time.
Yes.
Yeah, so hopefully you've had a good day.
I don't think you really get into a rhythm until like after 4 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like we're making our best effort to get back into rhythm.
Right.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah. Because like...
And the rhythm starts like just by getting here first. I mean, and then it's the rhythm of, you know, all the rest.
Yeah. I will say that, you know, it was a delightful time to spend with you last week.
Right.
I don't know how the listening audience feels.
Right.
But, you know, still. And we're back. Now, again... We try. And thankfully, this isn't a live show.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Regis and Kathy Lee, I mean, they couldn't take it back.
No.
But, I mean, you know, we get here. It's okay that we're an hour and 15 minutes after when we meant to start or, like, to gather.
Sure.
But we're back to a 3-camera shot.
Right.
Just bring this
there
up.
There you are.
Look at that. I can lovingly look into the camera and show you these hazel eyes. Lift my mouth up above the microphone and give you the old smile.
And you got your Johnny Cash shirt on.
Yeah. Amy and I
Man
watched Johnny Cash this last weekend, I think.
Yeah. Which the
Walk the Line. Walk the Line.
That's your favorite.
Yeah.
Right there.
You know, I was thinking about it this morning.
Uh-huh.
And what I was thinking about was I wish I would have started keeping track, like on the cover of the DVD.
Yeah.
From watching it.
Oh, like how many times?
And just like kill lines, you know.
Right.
And I mean, like, for all I know, this is the 45th or the 55th time. I mean, I have no idea.
You have parts memorized already too? Do you have the you know what they're going to say next and you say it with them?
See, that's one of the things we were talking about how much of an idiot I am last episode. And one of the things that I really struggle with is, like, I have a terrible time memorizing lyrics. And so I have a terrible time memorizing movie lines. And so now there are only certain movies that I will watch over and over again.
Yeah.
And I've found that my tendency with that either has to do with science fiction or music.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean, I probably have Pitch Perfect, the first episode or the first volume. I have that one down, and
right.
I hear the cue to Universal, and it takes me into the opening sound or song for that. And Johnny Cash, yeah, I mean, there's some favorite part. I still find that movie incredibly inspirational on multiple levels, from the musical part to the love relational part to the chemical addiction part.
Right.
I mean, like, in just, you know, there's, you know, the first time Johnny's writing Folsom Prison Blues and he drops the octave on this thing that, you know, going into, you know, the time that they show up, him with the Tennessee 2 at the recording studio to audition to be on the label. That is such a moving scene. Yeah. And and then there's the time he rips up the stage because he comes out all cranked out and just out of his head, and he's flailing around and beating all the can lighting, and I mean he basically got told don't ever come back.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's lots of things.
Yeah, and you can see where it kind of plays into, the whole everything that you just mentioned, both with the chemicals and the addictions, and then bringing those in, and yeah. So I mean, you see lots of musicians, and that's where I liked all those biopics, kind of musical films of. I mean, you kind of see a different aspect of artistry based on like what they're presenting, and you kind of see some of the background, which is always nice.
Yeah,
I like the background,
and it's
like the things you don't always see when you go to live music. You see the performance,
right.
You don't know the background to it,
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, we digress.
Right.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so are you back to writing lyrics and all of this fun stuff?
Oh man, I just got back from it was supposed to be a 3-day trip.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even tell you this yesterday. This is hilarious. Supposed to be a 3-day trip. There's a property that Amy manages in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is about 3 to 3.5 hours away from where we're at in Chicago. And so we were going to leave Sunday afternoon and then, drive during the day. That fits my biorhythm really well. I mean, I don't like to get up early in the morning unless I have to. And usually that's like early morning rising is induced by travel, usually on an airplane.
Right.
If you're driving somewhere, you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And my choice would be get in the car later than earlier.
Right.
Okay. So now that we understand each other.
Yeah.
And so got home, was making lunch. I was pulling up. I knew where the property was. I knew how much time it was going to take. Open up the computer, get on the Airbnb, website to check. And on March 2nd, now mind you, I mean, today's like, what, the 25th?
Yeah, something
or
like
the 24th?
That. 24th, yeah.
Little Wesley is 20 years old, or 20 days old.
I was like, what? Wow, that's time travel.
I put a little dropper of my essence of Koval on him, and he just, poof, all of a sudden there's this little baby with a beard.
Bearded. A bearded baby.
Bearded baby. Yeah, what was I thinking? So I get on the website on May 2nd. So this was like on the 20th I was checking this. On May 2nd, the owner of the Airbnb in Grand Rapids sent me a message to say, oh, by the way, we sold our Airbnb, so we're not going to be able to, hope you can find another room.
Oh.
And so 18 days later, I'm getting ready to head out the door, and we have no place to stay.
Ah.
So it ended up working out okay because we got a lot done around the house and got a good night's rest, into bed early. And so when the alarm clock went off at 4:00 a.m.,
ooh,
well, you lose an hour.
That's true.
And it had to be there by a deadline. Now, the really cool thing is that when I got there, I called the hotel that we booked and said, hey, will you let me in early?
Right.
And they said yes. And so I curled up on the bed and took a nap. But I say all that in that the reason why I offered to drive and go is because I thought, you know what, this is going to be a 48-hour break. And so I was like, I'm going to do a writing retreat. And so the answer is yes. I have been writing lyrics, and things are just kind of jumping up, and I didn't. It's been a long time since I've written a song, but I'm okay with that because the content that's coming out, I'm like, hey, and like any songwriter, some of it's good and some of it's bad, but you got to play around with it all.
Right.
And so, I'm really committed. I'm hoping that I got, well, at the rate that I'm going, it's probably going to be looking more like 20 to 25 songs, and then I get melodies and arrangements put together and all that stuff figured out. Then I'm going to send it over the interwebs we had Cam on in one of our earlier seasons of last year,
Right.
and so he's gonna put some drum tracks to it, and at least if he gets to listen to the songs, then he can put together the tracks, and then I can record vocals over it and my guitar with the drums, so that it's, because I can have tendencies to pick up and slow down, and I'm not gonna lay down these rough tracks with a click or anything like that.
So do you start with, I mean, I hear this question given to musicians.
Yeah.
Do you start with the understanding, like, here's the music, and then you're like, hey, I need something to go with this? Or do you start with lyrics and say, now I need to put melody and music behind it?
Yeah, and people do things differently. If you look at Elton John and his writing partner, Elton is known as one of the people who has constant melodies going through his head. And he did, like, very few songs has he written the lyrical content to. There are some, but he would be an example. And so he's able to look at words and then form the melody around that. And so, but then there's other people who, it's the words, the poetry, that's what, and I kind of go that direction where I'm like, what do I need to get out of me? And then based on what the words are, to me, forms the chord structures I'm going to use. Because if it's dark and dreary, I'm not going to use bright chords.
Right.
And then, but what I have noticed about my songwriting in this season is that I've been listening intently for about 6 months to music, whether it's on my commute radio, record player, and picking out, like, okay, what moves me? What do I really like? I'm endeared to multiple different artists. So I would say The Head and the Heart, Lumineers, and probably Gregory Alan Isaacoff are probably currently three of my most, like, these groups influence me. And like when I listen to them, I'm listening to lyrics, I'm listening to rhythms, and I'm listening to melodies, and putting that together. Now, old school, I love the 70s.
Yeah.
So give me some Petty, throwback. I've listened to Johnny Cash isn't necessarily an influence to me on music.
Musically, yeah.
Anytime I play a Johnny Cash song, it's more of a tribute and an honor for what he did in music. But if you listen to a lot of Johnny Cash had like maybe 5 songs, and then he just wrote different lyrics for them all. And rinse and repeat,
Right.
I mean, that boom checka, and and really the idea of a blues turn, like if you think of Folsom Prison, that's pretty much a blues tune, in its structure. Anyway, and musicians, feel free to argue with me. Not a problem. Now, Brandy Carlisle, there's a lady with melody.
Right.
Okay, so then I would throw her into, that hat ring. And she hangs out with Elton John. So, I mean, like, that makes sense. Jeff Tweedy, on the other hand, of Wilco, is always strumming his guitar. And he will tell you he doesn't even care what the words are. He's like, people ask him, what does that song mean? He goes, I don't know. I just said words. It's the melody that makes sense to me, And so, but that dude is playing his guitar 4, 6, 8 hours a day into a cassette player, and then he goes back and he listens to his playing and what other melodies come out. And I will say, I've been watching, trash TV.
Right.
So when you run out of the things that you enjoy watching, then you go to the things that you less enjoy watching, but you enjoy watching that more than other stuff that you wouldn't want to watch at all.
Right.
So I've been watching Moonshiners and stuff. And so I've been learning a lot about the art and the craft of home distillery. And I would say that both words and music are very similar to a high grain alcohol. And that is this one team went to an old amusement park and put barrels with sails on the top of these swinging things so that they could get sea aging in in the barrels in the Appalachian Mountains.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And the sea aging, basically by being 18 months out at sea because of the just huge changes in temperature and the consistent motion, it's moving the alcohol to come against the oak. And so you can get something that tastes like a 15 or 20 year aged in 18 months. And just by the movement and all that stuff. So anyway, what I would say is I think melody and lyric both age with time. And so like I've gone through one book of mine and picked out, I'm like, yeah, that's garbage. That's garbage. That's garbage. Oh, but that phrase right there, now I can work with that and pull that out. And so, yeah, I'm just compiling right now. And I think, as we were setting up, and for people who are wondering, like, what are you guys up to? I'm like, we spent like 6 or 8 hours yesterday working on technology over at the church getting the cameras all put together. And one camera was being a jerk. And finally, through the art of observation, we're like, what does this mean? And Phil found it on Google. Like he's turning into a real great tech person. He's like, Google that shit. And so anyway, but yeah, it was just setting the difference between camera and video. And actually we run into that here in the studio all the time. And now we've been able to identify like, oh, well, that's happening on the screen. So this is what needs to happen.
Right.
But long story short, we, with all of that, time and stuff like that. Now I've forgotten where I'm even going with the story. But anyway, yeah. So, I know. It was the lyric. Yeah. I'm like, we had a good day today only because it worked out for us. And like, I'm making dinner last night. And I felt accomplished yesterday. I'm like, dang it, you know what? We worked hard. We accomplished our task. We got it done. It's to the next level. Oh, man, like I felt good about the work yesterday. And so as I was fixing dinner, I'm like, why do I feel good? Oh, I feel good because it worked out. Instead of being angry because it didn't work out. And we had this little cloud of doom over both of our heads because we could, now,
right.
Mind you, of the 6 hours of work, we spent 3 hours trying to fix one problem.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly how it went.
Like if we hadn't run into
why does that camera look different?
One problem, if we hadn't had that one problem, one thing,
right.
Then what would have happened? It would all been different, shorter.
Right.
Yeah. So
and
anyway.
then would you have walked away with the same accomplishment? No.
Well,
you'd been like, all right, we put in some good work, but it still didn't go our way. But now we put in some good work and it went our way. Good day.
So there's the thing. What I find is my head is always turning phrases. And so that's why, like I do. I have empty notebooks at the studio. I've got empty notebooks at the house. I've got pens next to the notebooks and then but I'm purposefully, with the turn of the new year and getting the house fixed and sold, I'm like, in 2022, I want to write an album's worth of songs. And to do that, you should write 2 to 3 times more than you're going to record. So ideally somewhere between, at 3 times with 12 songs to a record, ish, you should be 30, 36, 40 songs.
Just to get the 12 or 13 or...
Oh, yeah. And if there's good stuff, that if you have more than 12 good songs, then you've got to start on your next one. Mm-hmm. I just know that a lot of songs that I've performed live are songs that I wrote anywhere from, 10 to 15 years ago. Mm. And that was a different season for me. Right. And so and not only emotionally and relationally, but I even where I was in my life and the age bracket, and I just think that I've been ushered into a new season and should take the observations from that new season and put them down. So yeah, and then now, because I am writing, now when I listen to songs I'm on the radio, I'm not as much listening to melody and rhythm and what's going on. I'm listening to perspective. Where's the songwriter writing from? Is this a song about themselves? Is it about what moves them? Heard a song on the radio yesterday going home, and it was a person asking question. It was a question for the listener. Hey, what do you think about this and how this plays out? And so it's really cool that in music, not only, and I've had friends that are like, yeah, I mean, you can listen to the words, but like the first thing I listen to is melodies and harmonies, and people are just built differently. And I've never run into a person who's aligned with me who's a melody person. So it's always boiled down to that I've got to come up with it myself and things like that. And yet there are people, I think of Jay Schneider, it would not surprise me that Jay's a melody guy in his head. But he takes in a lot of, like, he can listen to things and translate that to his fingers, whether it's playing piano or playing a guitar and stuff. Just a master at that kind of thing.
Which is great.
Yeah, so to celebrate it.
Where do you find like when are you most inspired, or does it just pop up?
Yeah, it just pops up.
But
I mean, it could come from a conversation. A lot of times it's about observation. Taking a look at things. I do know that when I read words that stirs in me, which I don't think is uncommon.
Right.
As far as literature and how that can influence. But and I'm a weirdo. I don't read books a lot. What I read, I usually have to chew on. I'm sure there's deeper stuff, because there's stuff that I read that I don't understand, right? But at least the stuff but this could come back to the simplicity of my idiocrity. That I'm just like, yeah, it takes me a while to get through. Jack went up the hill. I'll think about that for a while.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, because as you were talking about kind of like a writer's retreat, does that tend to put pressure on you to be able to produce something, and does that then cause blockage? Or
not if I eat a salad.
Right, because if you're looking at that, you're saying I need to get this done in this, does that cause you to kind of pause more, or is there like, hey, now I have an opportunity to just kind of, dump all kinds of stuff that maybe was on top of my head or whatever that I didn't have time before? So how do you see that kind of that self-imposed, those things that are supposed to come out at this time? Like I've scheduled this, I've put it on my calendar, like this is what I'm going to do in this time. And do you find that there's any, hard parts about that?
Well, I can speak from my perspective. Our listeners just need to if you've never listened to us before or you haven't spent much time with Phil and I, just remember I grew up in a blue collar home, and both my mom and dad worked, and they worked to be able to provide what they considered a better life for their children. And so certainly we weren't poor, but we didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And and to give a bracket, I mean, I was born in 67, so my parents were, children of the 40s, which was like, if you think about that, that was only 20 years after the Depression.
Right.
Okay. So like just some context,
Mm-hmm.
The United States was just, when I was born, was not done with the Vietnam conflict. I mean, like, as
Right.
far as like working through some of the stuff, we had just gotten to the moon, if we did get to the moon. And so,
Conspiracy theories.
so, and I grew up in rural Michigan on a farm, working as a farmhand. And so my whole life since I was 12, I worked a job to be able to make money for, like, to be able to put tennis shoes on my feet for basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have ingrained in me a really blue collar work ethic. And I pretty much, by the time I got done with colleges, I'm like, I might not be as smart as you, but I'll outwork you.
Right.
And so it comes down to my latest book idea. I won't really speak into it because it's could go on to the ether and someone could beat me to it because I take time to do what I do.
Uh-huh.
But as a person who grew up with that, and admittedly, I would imagine, I haven't asked my kids, but I would imagine that, my children would recognize me as a workaholic. If I wasn't putting in 50 hours a week, I was being lazy. And that's 50 hours in 5 days. I mean, and probably would tip over the scale that it'd be 55 to 60 with 1 day off a week or whatever. So what I found is, so understand that about me. I'm not afraid to work.
Right.
And then what I've observed is, with the last 2 years of COVID, is that even though we've been isolated, that doesn't mean we haven't been busy people.
Right.
So what a retreat does is it takes my normal routine of busyness and it sets it aside. I didn't have any songs when I walked into the hotel room, per se. I had one set of lyrics down from the week before, but didn't even touch that. I had picked up a notebook that I'd been carrying around probably for 6 or 7 years and thought, I bet you there's something in here. Like, I knew I had written in the book and I knew that there was stuff. But what I needed to do, I needed to slow down enough to be creative. And for me, it's not the pressure of what are you going to produce. Because I've already learned you can't throw up the gate of, I'm going to write a song and it's going to be great. You'll never write a song.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, and I'm not writing a song to be able to write a hit. I'm writing music and a song and this could be a really selfish thing, but literally for my own pleasure. It's because it's in me. It should come out.
Right.
I've had people around me say, man, I love it when you sing. No, I don't understand that. I listen to my recordings. I don't get it. Okay, but I do, and I feel like I'm a hack when it comes to guitar. And other people are like, I really dig it when you play and you do what you do on guitar. I'm like, wow, that's great, because I don't even know what I'm doing on guitar. Picked up a couple things along the way,
Right.
And so I just like, what? I mean, like, I write a song and I fail? Well, I'm just doing it for my own pleasure anyway. And I do think that there is an art and a craft to putting words together. And I feel like because of my time on a platform over 30 some years of being in front of people on a platform, that there's a part of that craft that I'll claim. I'm good with words. And so, and so with that, why not take words and put them to melody? I mean, and there are a lot of people who can put words together, but don't put them to music. Mm-hmm. All right. So being able to put it to music is one thing that differentiates. But I think the opportunity for impact, and quite frankly, I mean, you have me come in and preach at Tabor, off and on.
Right.
I've been so out of that loop that I feel incredibly nervous when that happens, and and I'm glad to do it, and be able to help out and things like that. But quite frankly, I'd just rather listen to you preach. And Amy and I, we're there in that, it's just it. But again, how many years you been doing that?
Probably 13?
13 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of got a good groove going in the way your head works and all those things. So,
right.
That being said, if I can do it and I can do it with melody, and if I can have my vocal teacher tell me, no, that needs, you need to do that better in a different way, or I can have other musicians who are like, that really sucks. And I've had plenty of musicians in my life that when I brought music to the table, they're like, yeah, I don't like that at all. And I'm like, well, I dig it, so I'm going to sing it.
Right.
And there's those songs, and stuff. And
right. But and then that's where you're coming to the table a little bit differently, because if you are bringing something that's a part of you. Like if you were covering somebody's, stuff,
right,
and somebody's like, that sucks, you're like, yeah, cool, like I don't own it. It's not me.
Well, I've done covers and people are like, how you do that sucks. Like and specifically it was Joe Cocker's take on I Need a Little Help from My Friends, which is a Beatles tune. Mm-hmm. And people who are Beatles fans, then it's like you're messing with Madonna now. The Madonna,
right?
The Holy Grails.
Yeah, I like to mess with that. And I always try to. I think I've even said it on here. The Beatles are the Beatles. Like they're, it's fine. Right?
Right.
And if you love the Beatles, it's cool. Mm. But to act like music wasn't around prior to the Beatles would be completely ignorant. To be able to say they almost invented rock and roll or something, it's almost presented that way. Cut it out. If you love the Beatles, cool.
Yeah.
But these guys did not walk on water. These guys did not, create music.
But they had the Yellow Submarine. They were able to travel underwater.
Yeah, and I'm saying, I don't disdain them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I present it that way, but I really don't. There's some lyrics, there's songs that I like of the Beatles. I don't have any issues with that, but it's more let's not act like this is the only set of,
right.
Music that's out there that people can like or enjoy.
Yeah. No, now I will say, I think we both stand pretty, together. If I say these two words, Dave Grohl.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Dave Grohl working with Paul McCartney in that tune that they put together,
right,
in their songwriting session.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my gosh. And as I've been listening more, what I realize is the Beatles songs that I really enjoy, Paul's singing lead on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea of him as the bass player, and so we know another bass player that really excelled throughout his life, and that's Sting,
mm-hmm,
who played bass and sang lead And it's those odd other instruments that when you think of Genesis, and Phil Collins as a drummer singing lead.
Right.
I mean, like, that's like over the top. And yet, well, if you go back to Dave Grohl's band, Taylor Hawkins, he's on the drums and he's singing harmonies. And actually, the time I saw the Foo Fighters in concert, Dave had a bad throat, and Taylor basically carried the whole concert, singing all the parts, or all the lead parts. And Grohl was there and kind of trying to gravel it out, but he should have just walked off the stage. But then again, he finished a concert with a broken leg. So
That's true.
Again, to me, then it's about textures, and like one of the things that I love to listen to the Beatles about is the different textures that they were using. In the day when you couldn't just push a button and it's computer generated, oh, I want my guitar to sound like this. I mean, they were innovators.
Right.
But to your point, I think familiarity breeds contempt. And so when the Beatles came, they had their accents, they had their outfits, and they were the right age at the right time. And what they brought, just was, it opened the door. And it was a timing thing, too, with everything going on in the U.S. Now, I saw the documentary on Brian Wilson that's out right now.
Where's that at? I don't know if I've seen it.
I think it's on Prime.
Because I've seen a couple of pieces of, like, their...
Like, it's actually Brian. Brian's in this, and they're going through, and they have a gentleman who has been a writer and has a really... Like, Brian really appreciates the relationship. And so they're in a car driving around, like kind of like Comedians in Coffee and Comedians in Cars or whatever with Seinfeld.
Right.
And they do this thing. And you know what? That's such a beautiful, and I mean, just, letting Brian talk about his schizophrenia and his mental health and the difficult things. And, and who knows? With Brian, I mean, there were enough drugs going on. The dude could have chemically altered himself into the pit that he,
Right.
But
it's still funny. I mean, with Brian Wilson, the stuff that like that he was putting out was more of that California, like really laid back vibe. But then, I mean, you look at, other lead singers who are using probably the same amount of drugs. Like, you look at the Doors, like, completely different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, how do you come out of the same place with the same amount of, it's different, right? So.
Yeah. But they were saying in that documentary, the thing that really set those guys apart was Brian's ability to stack 5-part harmony.
Wow.
And then, like, he hears orchestration in his head. And, and so I think concerning the Doors, they needed the psychedelics to touch places in music that weren't in them, where, and quite frankly, that's the thing with the Beatles and then the Beach Boys is that, Brian Wilson was just in awe of what the Beatles were doing, and the Beatles were doing it after they met the Maharishi and were again into psychedelics and doing stuff like that. So, man, what a tangent! That's quite the trail, huh?
It was quite the trail. You never know.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it fascinates me because I love music, but I'm not a musician, or I'm
right.
not, like, I haven't dealt with, like, lyrical things, other than, like, words, sure. But I think it's different when you're forming, a speech versus writing, a song or whatever. So, yeah, so I'm always fascinated by all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I part of it has to do with meter, part of it has to do with form, and then part of it is, just being able to... You could say you know, yeah, just taking an idea and then you just start exhausting what things could be said about it. And, you know, and then I saw somebody put out, I think on the social medias or whatever, if you're going to write songs that make you cry. And I think there's probably a couple things in songwriting that I really, really do adhere to. And that is, tell the truth. You know, like I could do a fictitious songwriting thing, telling story, you know, and to point, Johnny Cash writing about Folsom, that really didn't happen to him, but he was singing it in first person. And
or The Boy Named Sue.
Or again, A Boy Named Sue. Yet, Get Rhythm was based out of him in everyday life in a path watching a shoeshine boy. And so like there, you know, there's room for all of it. And so, but one of the things is in my songwriting from people who have influenced me, other people that I've played with in bands and stuff like that, they identify that when I'm telling the truth about something I've lived out, that I sing from a different place. And so how that impacts them is more moving because they can tell it's so true. And it's not because I'm telling them it's true. It's because they can sense from where I'm singing, like the soulishness of where I'm singing, that it's true. So there's that. And then there's the part of being willing to be transparent so that you, like, there's songs that I've written that I can't hardly get through, you know, and songs that I've written about my kids, you know, and just my great love for them. It just when I start singing it, it moves me. And people sense that. And so, you know, emotionally moving song, I mean, I think people listen to music too. Whether, even if it's for escape, it's to feel in a way that's different than what, you know, everyday life is.
Right.
But I've been in backyard parties, actually recently, as recent as last October. And when I ask permission of the group, I'm like, hey, it would be okay if I sang one of my own songs, blah, 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 blah. And people would come up afterwards and they're like, yeah, you need more of your own songs, because, you know, they're like, and I think it has to do with authenticity, you know, and when I'm doing covers that I've done a bunch of times, and that was a filter in getting ready to have a cover band, was pick songs that you believe in, you know, sing songs that matter to you.
Right.
And that changed how the cover band was able to function and form, you know, in its pursuit of employment. But yeah, and I you know, and I miss it. You know, I think that there's the other part. You know, I've made a lot of transitions in the last 2 years, and yeah, and just miss. And it happened when we did the Oktoberfest at the church, and I played with Wally downstairs. I'm like, Wally hadn't heard any songs that I'd ever played. Wally had played while I had led some worship at the church.
Right.
And so people, you know, like he knew, but Wally is so good. All he needs is a verse and a chorus. He knows where the turn is, and then he just, you know, and I would tell him, I'm like, hey, this one's in 6/8, or you know, this is a hillbilly backbeat, or, you know, it would work really good to start with the kick, and, you know, and I'd give him a, you know, a couple notes on the song going in. And I stayed away from songs that usually had stops,
right,
you know, and stuff like that. But it's the interaction between the drummer and the rhythm guitarist where I'm like, especially when it's pared down that small. And again, Laura was supposed to be there, and something came up at work, and again, it's the interaction musically that with others. And as much as I say that, my mom will tell you, she'll tell me, she'll come back and she'll still stand firm. She's like, I know you like playing with a band. I like it when you play solo.
Yeah.
But then, she's my mom.
Right.
She loves me. She's like, when are you going to listen to me? I'm right. I'm right about this, Steve. I'm like, I know, mom. How many times have I said I know?
Uh-huh.
And I know, and so, but and actually, my son Micah and I have had some conversations, and he's like, I wish you could see yourself the way we see you.
Huh.
Yeah. And so, again, it's kind of one of these. And people say, well, you're so lucky because you're so creative. And I'll go back to the beginning of the story. I'm creative at the level I'm creative because I may not be the most gifted artist, but I'm going to work my ass off.
Mm-hmm.
I'll outwork
right.
the other average artist.
Which I would say is very true for what you've done already. I mean, you took voice lessons even when you knew how to sing.
Oh yeah.
You learned to play guitar even though you had already been strong. So there's all of that. Like you put in work that not everybody would. Not everybody'd be like, oh, well, I can play some chords and I'm going to be good. I can already sing, so I'll be good.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that you can't, but like you could tell the difference when somebody's coming to the table. Like I've kind of both refined but also practiced, my ass off on this to be able to make sure that that what I'm trying to be able to bring is a different level. And you can tell the level.
Well, and it goes back to, like I golf. Now I haven't golfed a lot in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But there was a time in my life that was my hobby and I really enjoyed. Well, my game changed when I had an instructor and he gave me lessons for a summer. And so now I can go out and golf, and Chris Thompson will tell you, he's like, where did this come from? He's like, of all the time we've worked together, we've only golfed together once. And, by the third hole, my muscle memory and core came back. And by the time we got to the eighth hole, I'm calling my shots and just, I'm being a jerk is what I'm being. I'm totally being a jerk, but I'm calling my shots and, I had my yards. But again, I haven't got old enough where my muscle mass and strength and stuff are very similar. Even though I'm sure I was stronger, younger, but and that's why I say it takes about 3 holes. I'm like, all right, well, I'm only hitting my 7-iron, 150 instead of 165. And you just figure out your math and then you start doing it. And if you know what, and then make the adjustments but all to
That's why I suck at golf.
All to the instructor because of math. Yeah, your math sucks. No wonder you can't do it. Yeah. And I think that it was probably that informed me, and I knew that I had gotten to a certain level in playing rhythm guitar. And then had a buddy of mine, we call him T-Bone. He was learning electric guitar at the time, and I'm like, man, I don't want to be left behind, if and a lot of folk artists, make the move from acoustic into electric, and that's a whole different monster. Holy cow. I remember the first 2 or 3 years playing electric guitar and how awful it was. Mm-hmm. But now I can pick up an electric guitar and it feels in my hand just the same. Like I know the different, it's just different touches, different play and,
right.
And stuff like that. And then after that happened, I'm like, oh gosh, I think Craig Willoughby was the most influential other player when it came to lead rhythm, that really changed my approach to how I would lead a song from guitar. And then that combined with, I have my book and jacket of all the things that I should be practicing on a daily basis that I don't. There's so much more that I could be that I'm just not, because I don't do that. And so I'm talking about working hard, but I'm hardly working at a lot of things.
But if you were saying that would be your goal for this season, you would put in work to be able to get there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's the difference.
Well, and the other thing is writing songs forces me to have to, because when I get to the melody parts, then I'm going to take out my book. I'm going to look at my shapes. I'm going to practice some stuff. I'm going to pick out melody line. I mean, like the project of songwriting forces me into all those things.
Right.
You know, and I've had, I'll just put the elephant in the room out there that people might be sitting there. We're talking about creativity. We're talking about playing music and stuff. And I've had people ask me, they're like, do you miss leading worship? And, what I tell people is that I get to lead worship. It's, I come in, I'm leading worship during Holy Week, and I'm more than willing to be able to, but it's not the thing that drives me, in that my approach is all of life is worship. So my attitude towards what I'm doing as I serve others, as I help, and I think that's why yesterday was so gratifying to me, is because when we walked away, I thought, cool. Now, live stream, we've got 3 of the same cameras, the shots, everything's working together. Like, cool, this is good.
Right.
Where, 2 years ago, you guys are doing live stream from an iPad,
Right.
which, hey, it's what you had, and it's what you knew to be able to do.
Right.
And, and how cool when you need to order the supply. Like, it was so cool for me to go to my Amazon account under orders and go, yep, that worked. Where at the beginning of the project, I didn't have a clue. I managed the department that took care of that,
Right.
And so, so much was, picked up with that. Well, gosh, when I'm cleaning floors at the house, that to me, those are acts of worship. And so that's where, to me, worship isn't just a song on a Sunday. It's in all of life. It's as much as thoughts are going through my head, I'm having conversations with, God. Or, if you're a person who questions a supreme authority or a supreme being, then, call it the universe, or, whatever you need to do. But in worship, and quite frankly, there is just an incredible team at Tabor, that what they do and how they do it, the stacked harmonies, the play. I love it when John brings his electric guitar.
Me too.
Because it's just that jangly fill. I would rather him do that than play bass, just because and he's so good at just plunking the parts along with. And again, Wally, hands down. You throw Caitlin and where her rhythm, and then you have the 3 ladies stacking their harmonies together. Oh my gosh! And at some point, it's like, why get in the way of that? And then and so then and then there's this other part where I guess I haven't attached anything that I am in front of God to any specific act as more important than the other. So I used to preach 3 times a week for 13 years.
Yeah.
And so I was the lead pastor, and and then I became a worship leader and led worship for 11 years. And people are like, do you miss preaching? And I'm like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Be okay with me doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But because I had been a lead pastor, I felt like I was able to do things that other worship leaders weren't able to do. And as that opened up, and that was communicating, understanding a pastor's role. I mean, we didn't have any fizzers or like divides. I'm like, I just understood the role, so fulfill the role. And then, quite frankly, when I'm running camera work and doing live stream, I feel like I do it well. And so it's serving a different purpose for it to be done well in. And so why, like it just all of that. And like people are like, do you miss it? And I'm like, well, I mean, even so, I'm like, what I miss is sitting next to my wife. And so like I did a one camera shot to you and I went over and sat next to my wife and it was like, no, that was good. Yeah, because that's the part is how do you get to share in that spiritual journey together when the work of the church is what you're committed to, and stuff. So anyway, so I went off on that, but I know that when people are hearing me talk about missing playing with other players and stuff like that, and they're like, well, yeah, but what about, being in church? And well, there's only so many hands that can go around, and and when you're sharing the load and with what's going on, then you just get to pick it out and figure it out. But yeah, and then when times come that people are like, and I mean, Ash Wednesday, you guys were without, right?
We were.
Yeah, I mean, so like that's the thing is I was out of town to be able to take care of stuff back in Des Moines, and Wesley was being born, and houses being sold and all that stuff, and you guys ended up doing a service without.
Right. It was weird.
Yeah.
Still worship, but just weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back. You were
I'm sorry.
looking at no, it's fine.
Oh, cool.
But we were talking. I mean, and you kind of summed it up like music, but we're also talking about creativity.
Yeah.
And I would say that would be a big theme of what we've been, trying to address here. So do you think that creativity you are born with or that it's learned?
Oh, I think it's in everyone.
Okay.
Absolutely in everyone. I think now this is going to be my worldview. All right. And I'll just be direct about it. A lot of times we dodge and weave. But I really do believe in a creator. And so I think we're created in our Creator's image. And because of that, we're also creators. Now, it can show up in non-healthy ways. I think power and control becomes an issue in people's lives, that when things are out of sync, and then it's an addiction in itself. Everybody gets worked up about chemical addiction. All right. Power and control.
It's worse.
That's an addiction. People who get angry and use anger to have control. That's an addiction. And so I just think, in whether it's arts and crafts or whether it's to the level of being an artist, I think, people who like sew, I think that's creativity. And it can show people who use crickets. For people who are wondering why people would play with bugs, it's actually a machine
Right.
that you put designs in, and it cuts stuff out, and it could be stuff that goes on a t-shirt, or it could be stuff that goes on a window, or it could be stuff that goes on material that, the banners at church are made, I think, out of, similar.
They're on cricket.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think parenting is creativity.
Right.
Being able to read a child, being able to see what's going on, knowing when to press in, knowing when structures and disciplines are necessary versus letting a child be a child. And it just, yeah. I think how basketball influences men. I think what men really love is they love the idea of creativity. They enjoy watching basketball because of, they say, no, it's all about the sports, and strength and agility and endurance and stuff. I think when you watch basketball long enough and you see offensive patterns and defensive positions and seeing how other players play, and then whether it's, I think there's a creativity in how you care for others, and so some people like to write notes, other people like to text, some people like to go analog and actually talk face to face, I just see creativity all over the place. I don't think just because I'm a musician and because I'm an artist and because I'm a potter and because that makes me more creative than anybody else or whatever. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people who identified the arts within them and they pursued training at higher levels of university education, and things where they were under people that mentored them for them to hone their craft of, doing the things that they do. So I do think whether someone, spends time to pursue, what they're creative about is, that's up to the individual. And I think maybe that's the difference where in me, I just recognize it and I'm like, I'm gonna live here. And if I'm working a desk job, I'm finding a creative outlet. Like in me, I can't do anything other than it has to get out somehow.
So creativity being in all people, just being able to then recognize, like, where is your creativity? And it may look differently.
Oh, yeah.
Like everybody's creativity is going to show differently.
Yeah.
But being able to say, like, yeah, I'm just not creative. I mean, and I've heard that, a ton of times from different people. But I would still agree with you that creativity is just going to look different.
Yeah.
Like you may not be creative in painting or, in art or what, like, but where can your creativity come out that's different? It's in a different way, in a different place. And I think that was probably the big difference, is that it just might look different for different people.
Yeah.
So where can you foster your creativity today? And being able, even if you're saying, I am not creative, and you've used that phrase, like, all right, so then if we're telling you that you are creative, then where can you foster it? Where can you find it? Where can you say, hey, I need to explore this?
Yeah. Yeah, and I heard somewhere that some of the best works of art are hung on refrigerator doors. And creativity and the ability to transfer what is inside onto a page, it's in all children. Just some people, as they grow, shut those parts off. And again, I'm not saying, but gosh, if you wanted to experiment with something, I'd say go to Michael's or go to Hobby Lobby, go to the paper section, get a blank book, and go around the corner and either grab colored pencils or crayons. And just sit. I think people are too busy in life to be able to enjoy the creative parts. And the other part is, hey, it's okay if you have other things that you really enjoy. Right. But I think in relationship, I think creativity is key. And I think in whether that's spousal or familial or community, like, like if there's things that I'm like, ugh, do I have to do that? I'm like, all right, Joker, come on, pull your hooey together and get creative on how you're going to approach this,
Right.
But gosh, if we think about like when we did the backpack thing a couple years ago, and I just took sidewalk chalk and I just started something. Pretty soon I had 3 little kids there, and they were coloring. Well, by the time that there were 8 or 9 children there, then the parents came over.
Right.
And what did they start doing?
The
They
same thing.
Picked up the chalk and they enjoyed it. You know, and so yeah, it's great opportunities. I think that's why some people enjoy reading. I think it has to do with the story, but I also think that it has to do with the form. Like they enjoy taking in, what is being put down on page. And so like, I dump literature into that. There's just so much. I think people who are math driven, obviously you and I aren't, but I just, and there's people who work on automobiles that what comes out of what they're making and what they're working on, I just think it's all intertwined and tied together.
So find a way to be creative. Find that in, and yeah, because I would always say, like before, I mean, I think I probably even use it like I'm not creative, but I think
that's not true.
It's just a different kind of creation.
That's what it is.
And that's what I appreciate.
You love to cook,
right?
And
there's all kinds of stuff that can be creative there.
Yeah, and you love trying. Like I would challenge people, if you don't think you're creative, I would ask you, when's the last time that you let yourself dream? Just dream about coming up with an idea that is so out there that you're like, there's no way that could ever. You go back to the point when you stopped dreaming, and that's the last time you were creative.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to be able to challenge the listener, viewer today is,
start dreaming.
Start dreaming.
Start dreaming.
Yeah. I mean, because I think that we need more creativity and in all of its forms. And I think that's the way to do it is as you mentioned, challenging in relationship. And you mentioned multiple different levels of relationship that can happen, is then to be able to then challenge in the relationship to be able to say, hey, like, where can creativity happen?
Yeah. And give yourself permission that it's okay. It's not a waste of time.
Right. And I think if more of that occurred, we would find lots of good things.
Well, and I know we're winding up, but the systemic difficulty is that we've never been at a place in time where the arts has been so undervalued.
Right.
But it's concurrent in relationship to the value of humanity held by humanity. And so banding together to say, I will dream, I will create friendships, create relationship, I will be creative, is fighting against a diminished society concerning itself.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Heavy stuff, dude.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Hey, thank you so much, everybody. And, once again, we put the invite. Do you have questions that you would love for us to answer? Maybe they're questions you don't know the answers to, or maybe it's something, a topic that you would be like, these two are nuts. And I'd love to figure out where they stand on that. Send us an email at cutdaisiesandunicorns@gmail.com. Gmail.
And we for sure
.com.
will get it. We will get it. We will read it. And we will respond.
Even if it's like, hey, I got to think about that for a while.
Right.
Because I don't do anything fast. That's what I figured out. Now, the other thing that gets in the way of creativity is mess. You got to make a mess to be creative.
There you go. And not to be afraid of mess then, right?
Right. See where this is going?
Uh-huh.
That's a
Right.
whole nother podcast.
Because then you get OCD, right? You know,
Oh, yeah.
And if everybody's got, I think, is a slightly, on the scale of OCD. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some people that are like it's a real mental condition, but
Mhm.
people who are clean for whatever, like messes, can't do that.
Yeah.
But hey, mess is okay sometimes.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to write this down for next time. We need to talk about game changers.
Game changers.
Game changers in life. And so, even to our listeners, if you've had something in your life that's been a game changer, let us know about it.
Right.
We'd love to hear about that.
I'd be happy to learn.
All right, you got anything else, Phil?
I think that's good for today. We've dug into music and creativity, so it's another theme of ours.
Yes. Yes, it is. All right, so from Philzy and Steve-O, we're signing off. See you later.
See ya.